Hey everybody, here I am with another Pride and Prejudice review, much sooner than I expected, and this time we're talking about 2016's Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. I hadn't actually been planning to review this one. I saw it a couple years ago and did a brief mini review of it at the time, and originally I felt like that was enough. But that mini review was kind of inconclusive, and some time has gone by, and I've kind of been thinking of seeing it again, and now does seem like a good season for it, so here we are. Pride and Prejudice and Zombies is a reimagining of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice that takes the original storyline and characters and plops them into the middle of a zombie apocalypse. The movie stars Lily James as Elizabeth Bennet and Sam Riley as Mr. Darcy, and they're joined by a colorful collection of supporting actors, including Charles Dance, Lena Headey, Matt Smith, Douglas Booth, Bella Heathcote, Jack Huston, and Sally Phillips. It was directed by Burr Steers and adapted from the book Pride and Prejudice and Zombies by Seth Grahame-Smith. I was pretty skeptical when I saw the movie the first time. It just looked so silly, and watching it, I had a hard time keeping myself from making comparisons to the original Pride and Prejudice as I know it. And after I saw it, I wasn't sure how I felt. Part of me was confused, maybe a little shocked, but then another part of me admitted that I was entertained. I let a couple years pass, but lately I have felt that maybe it was time to give it another look. I've seen all the other Pride and Prejudices multiple times, so it's only fair, and besides, I'd like to know for sure, do I or do I not like this movie? Watching it a second time was definitely a different experience. I was more relaxed, I knew better what to expect, although I'd forgotten a lot that happens, especially in the second half, and in general, I was just more ready and willing for this kind of adventure. Before, I couldn't help making comparisons and being critical of how they changed characters and scenarios, but this time, for whatever reason, I tried to let go and judge it more for its own merit, and I actually was able to appreciate how much of Austen's groundwork, and especially her original language, is still present. The incorporation of zombies changes everything, of course, but doesn't ruin it. I don't feel like this movie disrespects the original. I believe I'm a purist at heart, and the most faithful adaptations of books I love are almost always my favorite, but sometimes it is fun to see something different, something new, and that's certainly what you get here, new versions of very familiar characters fighting against an adversary that in their world seems absurdly out of place. I find the cast pretty satisfying. Lily James makes a fine Lizzie Bennet, perhaps bringing a more feisty edge and fierce independence to the role than her predecessors. All the members of the Bennet family do a good job, though some of their parts are relatively small. The five sisters work very well as a unit, which makes sense in this world where they've trained to fight zombies as a team and as individual warriors, but at the end of the day, they're still sisters, giggling and teasing and chasing and ultimately supporting each other. The casting of Charles Dance as Mr. Bennet was excellent. He's a favorite of my mom's, so of course that made her happy. And a real standout is Matt Smith hamming it up as Mr. Collins. That's Parson Collins here, he insists. Smith seems to be bent on stealing every scene he's in, which he does pretty successfully. This is a hilariously different Collins from any we've ever seen before, and I wonder, was he following a script or just doing his own thing? Speaking of things I wonder about, and this is completely random, there are two occasions on which a character almost wipes out on an apparently slippery floor. Bingley trips at the Netherfield Ball, and Collins trips at Rosings. I find Douglas Booth's Bingley in this sheepish moment especially charming, and the way it's played makes me wonder if this was scripted or accidental and they just kept rolling.
Edwin, where is dessert? Oh! Hello, Stan.
As for Mr. Darcy, I believe I was a little critical of him when I talked about the movie the first time, but, I think I'm getting used to him. Sam Riley's Darcy is possibly the roughest and most socially awkward of the Darcys I've seen, just because he looks so miserable at every public function he has to attend. He does make the required effort, but he's obviously much more at his ease on the battlefield as opposed to the withdrawing room. Becoming a superior fighter is what he's put all his time and energy into, not polishing his manners, and he'd much rather be out on official business as Colonel Darcy, fighting and hunting zombies. I think the first time I saw this, I commented that I wasn't a big fan of Riley's voice. It still isn't exactly a voice that makes me swoon, but I do think something about its rusty quality suits the character. So all things considered, in addition to his cool leather coat and superb fighting skills, I think he makes a pretty good Darcy. The awkwardness and shyness, some of his expressions and reactions, he's growing on me, as I think a good Darcy should. I'd put him not at the top of my list, but up there. I was going to talk about how disappointed I was that there's no scene of Darcy and Lizzie dancing at the Netherfield ball. However, deleted scenes, there's a whole bunch of them from the Netherfield ball. What is it with these modern adaptations cutting out some of the most important scenes? 2011 Jane Eyre does the same thing. And why did they cut this scene? It's great. It's one long continuous shot. It builds up Lizzie's animosity and Darcy's bewilderment. It has Collins on the side being creepy. And it makes something Lizzie says to Darcy at the end of a later scene, which was kept in the movie, make much more sense. Ugh, I'm so upset now. Well, I'm excited that I found the scene, but still, why did they cut it? They also cut some good stuff with the younger sisters, who in the original cut I thought weren't developed enough. Mary Bennett especially has some good comedic chops. And I thought they decided not to do Lizzie's visit to Pemberley, but no, they had it in there originally, they just cut it and left it in the deleted scenes. There's an entire deleted scene where Lizzie and Darcy both run up to assist his sister Georgiana in whacking zombies. And then they see each other and they're both like, whoa, what are you doing here? And it's awkward and great, and he looks cuter here than he does in the rest of the movie. Oh, and in case you're wondering, yes, he's all wet because they did the thing. I don't know why they did the thing, but they did. That's one thing they did keep in the final cut, this facetious homage to Colin Firth's jump in the pond. Ugh, these deleted scenes change everything. I probably would have liked the movie a lot better the first time around if they'd kept this stuff in. As it is, I can't really complain that Darcy and Lizzie don't share enough scenes. The script does a good job of throwing them together as frequently as possible. It's quite amusing watching this stoic, battle-driven Darcy fall in love with her, and this is one of those really satisfying, even if a little cheesy, movies where every time one of them is in trouble, suddenly the other one comes to the rescue in the nick of time. And I think Lizzie saves Darcy as many times as Darcy saves her. Possibly more. Overall, as an adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, it does okay. Even if you don't consider the deleted scenes, it hits a lot of the major points, and like I said, there's a surprising amount of Austen's original dialogue retained, though it is occasionally modified or relocated. And of course, there are significant changes to a lot of those major scenes. The proposal scene, for instance. Rather than simply having a heated argument, Darcy and Elizabeth literally start fighting each other, throwing things and wrecking the furniture. It seems insane, but really, given their responsive training and the intense emotions at work, it's not so crazy within this context. A well-choreographed throwdown between Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy may not be something that I ever asked for, but it is awfully entertaining. And I must say, props to all the actors for being able to deliver some wordy lines while fighting and grunting and kicking and everything. That's tough. This is definitely the most physically demanding Austen adaptation, and these people did their own stunts. As for accuracy, well, the title alone isn't period accurate, since the word zombie as a term for the flesh-eating or brain-eating undead didn't become a thing until the 1970s, and that was by accident. But the whole movie is full of anachronisms, inaccuracies of dress, some that would be shocking in Austen's time, disregard for Regency customs, but I'm not really sure it matters in this case. I mean, we're talking about a movie called Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. I don't think we're really looking for historical accuracy. I think my biggest complaint is that I wish the opening titles weren't so confusing. Charles Dance's Mr. Bennet narrates us through a speedy tour of a century's worth of history of the war against the undead. This is pretty important stuff for establishing our setting. It's a lot to take in, especially when you're also being distracted with this creative artwork. Because it's so hard to grasp this information all at once, I end up struggling throughout the rest of the movie with some of the more tactical and historical details. Not that it's terribly important, but characters do reference some of this stuff, and it ends up being a little frustrating trying to keep up with things while your mind is also busily trying to adjust to all the changes in the story. As for the gore and violence, which I think it's safe to say your average Austen aficionado probably isn't a huge fan of, I don't think this is too bad. It is a PG-13 zombie movie, but there isn't an overwhelming amount of blood and guts, and a lot of what we do see is bombastic and played for laughs. And in the fight scenes, the camera tends to focus more on the fighters than on the zombies they're taking out. So, to the question, do I like this movie, I think my answer is turning out to be yes. Surprisingly, I do. It's not a perfect movie, it's not a cinematic masterpiece, and it's not a perfect adaptation, but it's romantic and funny, with enough Pride and Prejudice to satisfy me, and it's just generally fun all around. There are some movies that take a little getting used to. For me, this is one of them, but I think I'm gonna like it more every time I see it. I hope you enjoyed this review. It got a little bit lengthy. I don't know what happened. I guess I got into it. Let me know your thoughts on this movie if you've seen it in the comments down below, and I will see you again soon. Thanks for watching!